It's June. I've got my bushcraft gear with me. I'm bushcrafting in June. June? Where the hell's the first 6 months of the year gone? Hi folks, I'm Craig Taylor, and as always a huge thanks for joining me here on my YouTube channel, the Bushcraft Padawan. Well, I think we've ascertained that it's June, so as I've done for the past 2.5 years now, it's time for me to make that commitment and get out into the woods, either for a full day or an overnighter or a full day and a couple of nights, something like that. And June, here we are, is no exception. You'll know if you're a regular viewer of my monthly overnighter or my monthly all dayers that rather than just come out into the woods and potter around aimlessly, bumping into trees and such like, I always like to come out with a plan in mind, and June is no exception. In no particular order, I'm gonna put my hammock up again. I'm getting addicted to this, aren't I? Not because I'm staying out overnight, but because, well, why not? It's a beautiful day, nice and warm in the woods. Why not have a little lie down, just a crafty little snooze in the hammock? And of course, every time I put the hammock up, I'm getting better at it. I'm getting the right height, I'm getting the right tension. The Beckett hitches are being tied quicker and more safely each time. So I'm gonna get the hammock up. I'm gonna get a brew on using my Ohuhu wood burner stove. I'm going to forage some local dead standing in this area that I spotted a few weeks ago, and I also want to use some sycamore, I think it's sycamore on sycamore bow drill set that I've had tucked away in my garage for a little while, see if I can get an ember to blow that into flame, to use that to ignite the dead standing twigs that I'm going to use in my Ohuhu stove. So quite a convoluted way of making a hot chocolate, but good skills practice all the way through. And then finally, I was in this area a few weeks ago, as I've mentioned, and there's some lovely sort of thumb thickness, slightly thicker than thumb thickness pieces of dead standing just over to my left now. Pretty sure it's sycamore, but I'm not sure, I'll need to check. But I wanted to have a go at carving a pot hanger. Not because I'm cooking on it today, not because I'm doing an overnight or anything like that. I'm just going to have a brew today and eat some sandwiches I've brought with me. But just because it's a good exercise to go through, and if I do come out to this area again, I can leave that pot hanger to one side, tucked out the way, and I can cache it there to come back at a later date. So enough of me telling you what I'm planning to do. Let's get on and actually get it done. Don't look at the camera, 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 don't! If you're a regular viewer to the channel, you've seen this stove in use quite a few times in the past. It's my Ohuhu wood twig burning stove. I recorded a video on this, I think it was last August or September, and it really took off. It seems that a lot of people were searching for this particular make of stove or this particular principle of stove. And I got loads and loads of positive feedback, not about the video as such, but about the way that I was using it. Apparently, there is a very wrong way of using that, and that is to just stick the twigs in and allow it to burn like a conventional fire. When actually all the reading that I've done suggests this is almost an upside down fire. Your fuel goes in first, then your kindling, then your tinder on top. What's also unique about these types of stoves, and I'm not going to go into too much detail of it in this video, let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to, perhaps in a future video. Not only do you get the burn from the fuel burn, not only do you get the heat from the fuel burning, but actually as that fuel is burning, it is drawing in air through these holes at the bottom. That air is not only being sucked up into the fuel compartment, if you like, but if you look on the inside of this, you can see some holes here. So the air is also being drawn in, superheated. It runs up through the double wall of the construction of this. The super hot air comes out of these holes at the top, and is then burnt off. So you're almost getting a dual burn. You're getting a burn from the fuel, but you're also getting a burn from the hot air that the fuel is drawing in. So quite fuel efficient in that respect. It also leaves little if any trace behind at all, which is why I'm a big fan of using it if I'm just popping out for a brew or making something in a single billy can or in a skillet, something like this. So I'm going to go now, I'm going to harvest some fuel for this. You'll come with me and you'll see this, the diameter of the fuel that I'm harvesting. One of the other great things about this is, if you find a decent length of dead standing at the right thickness, you don't need a particularly great amount of fuel. You only really usually need one limb to actually be able to harvest a lot of fuel from. So in terms of fuel collection, it's also very quick as well. Join me and you'll see what I mean. I talked a lot earlier on in the video about using a lot of thin dead standing for fuel, and I'm in the midst of it here. I hope you can make out behind me, but it's all this stuff here. There's absolutely tons of it. It's almost as far as I can see in that direction, behind the camera, to my left, your right, and behind my left shoulder. There's just absolutely tons of this finger thickness, thumb thickness, dead standing. I'm pretty certain, although I'm slightly less certain now, but I'm pretty certain that I'm definitely less, I think it might be ash, although there is definitely some of this where it's had better conditions, and it's Acer pseudoplatanus sycamore. Yes, maybe something with its very young elder. There's a lot of it, regardless of what it is. It's dead and it's standing and it's off the ground, therefore it's, you know, it's standing. So if I just bring this closer to the camera, you'll see against my finger, it's kind of thumb thickness, finger thickness. It's no thicker than that. I'm 6'2" and this is, crikey, this is probably about 10 or 11 feet, but the decent thicknesses run out probably about 7 or 8 feet. When you're using these wood burning stoves like I showed you earlier on, you don't need a lot of this. I could take this one piece here, and I'm going to, and use that for at least 2 fuel loads for this stove. Let me show you why you don't need a great deal. There's the fuel compartment there. That's where the fuel goes in. That's the depth of the fuel compartment, the bottom and the top, and on top of that sits the holder for your mug or your pan or your skillet or whatever. So it's not particularly deep. I don't know, probably, I don't know, maybe 4 inches, 5 inches. It's never 6 inches, probably 4 or 5 inches depth. That's the circumference of it. That's the perimeter of it there. You can imagine if I chop this down and place it in there, if I chop thickness, if I chop lengths off this of 4 or 5 inches and then stack them upright into here, this fills up quite quickly. You don't need a particularly long length of this for this to be filled up. Standing them on end into here quite quickly fills that area up, and I'll show you this once I actually harvest this and take it down. But one of the great things about these types of stoves, as I've mentioned, is you don't need a lot of fuel. It burns incredibly economically. You get, I think, twice the burn for your fuel, and you don't need a lot of fuel. So if you don't need a big roaring open fire for whatever reason, these are an absolutely fantastic stove to take out with you. If you still want to have that element of burning a natural fuel, but you don't want to burn huge amounts, or you don't need to burn huge amounts, this is a very, very nice compromise. So I'm going to get on now. I'm going to take one of these down, I'm going to chop it into those lengths, and you'll see me dropping it into here, and you'll see just how little it's needed to actually fill this up. So you saw me there just chop a piece off. It's, you know, it's sort of thumb length, maybe a bit more. It drops into there. You just hold it up so you can see it in the upright position. That's it. I'm just going to chop lots of those off, stack them on end, shoulder to shoulder, into there, and that becomes my main fuel. So I've now got a template I can just cut loads of them off at that length. They'll gradually get narrower because I'm working from the bottom of the sapling up. They'll gradually get narrower. That doesn't matter. It's the height, it's the length of them that's important, not necessarily the diameter of them. One down. I find that when it comes to stacking these in, it's pointless trying to stack it upright because they just fall over. Putting them in at a slight angle, just tilting the whole fuel container to a slight angle means, as I'm doing here, that actually you're putting them in flat, and when they're all in, and they're all compacted of course, they're all resting against each other, and you stand it up, nothing can fall over because they're holding one another up. Teamwork. So I'm probably about 2/3 full there, maybe a little more. You get the principle here now, don't you? I'm just gonna probably carry on processing the rest of that sapling I took down. There'll be plenty in there, plenty left on the rest of the sapling to fill that up. But you get the concept now. Chopping them down can't be any higher really, or deeper or taller than top to bottom of this. Cramming them in, keeping them stood upright. Then we can move on to the kindling, or the kindling and the tinder phase. I'm probably going to leave it at that now. You'll notice that there are gaps here. I'm okay with that. If we think back to the fire triangle, oxygen being allowed to circulate, cramming that fuel in there is probably not going to do me any favours. So I left a few gaps so that this can move around. And also, this is a fuel. I still need to insert some thin kindling, perhaps some pencil lead thickness twigs amongst this, onto which I'm going to add the ember, fingers crossed if I can get the bow drill going, onto that. So I don't want to cram this full. There's still a little bit of tinder and kindling to go in here for this to ignite. But broadly speaking, I hope you get the concept of what I've done there. What I hope you're able to pick up there is certainly the bigger pieces that you've just seen on screen, but in between those bigger pieces, stood on end again, lots and lots of pencil thickness or pencil lead thickness twigs as well, in between those thicker chunks. And whatever I've got left, I've broken up into much smaller chunks and just scattered across the top. Every little helps. I may have stumbled upon a little problem. Let me explain. I've brought my bow drill set out. It's sycamore on, sycamore on sycamore. I've crafted myself a bow. Perfect. We don't know yet, do we, whether I'm going to be able to get an ember with this, but let's look on the bright side. Let's assume that I am able to get an ember. Great, I've got an ember glowing. How do I transform that into flame? Well, I've just spent about 30 to 40 minutes scouting round, and there's nothing I can find. There's no dried grass, there's no dried heather or bracken, there's no honeysuckle, there's no tree with a bark in the right condition to scrape that and process that into a bird's nest. There is nothing that I can find. I've looked for just over half an hour to actually transform what I hope, fingers crossed, will be an ember into a flame for me to then drop into that wood burner stove that I have there. So lesson learnt there, but I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm still going to have a go at getting an ember, because even if I get an ember and I can't blow it into flame because I don't have the resources, I've still got an ember. So I class that as a big takeaway. I will just default to using some other method, and I've got some birch bark with me, some other method to be able to bring that into flame. That's not my concern. I'm confident I can bring the stove into flame. I just wanted to make that transition from a bow drill to an ember to a flame, and then the wood stove. So a slight bump in the road, but ultimately still an opportunity for me to practice my bow drill technique. Willow's going absolutely ballistic behind the camera. The noise of this and the motion of it. That was very unusual. As soon as I started bowing, I started getting smoke, which is unheard of for me. I'm not going to bring the camera in to shot. I want to focus on the ember, but I will certainly bring the ember up to the camera if it consolidates. I want to get it off the floor quickly though, because I've had a lot of rain here recently. The ground will be very damp. Oh no. Okay, rescue time. Okay, I think I rescued that. It actually blew off my board that I caught it on. So I think you're picking up there. It's always difficult to tell what you're seeing versus what I'm seeing, but what I'm seeing is a very thick, consolidated, fibrous ember. Lots of smoke coming off it, and I'm just starting to detect now, and I think you can on camera, that telltale glow inside. Wonderful. Wow, I'll be honest, I've surprised myself there. The moment I put pressure on and started bowing, I really do hope it came out on camera, that smoke started coming out. Fantastic. Just ever so slightly blowing on this to give you, the viewer at home, an idea. If I just move, there we go, definitely picking that up on camera, I can see that. Wonderful. I'm going to drop that into my Ohuhu stove. I don't think it's going to do anything, to be honest. I don't think any of those pieces of kindling in there are fine enough, fibrous enough for this to do anything, but it'll do no harm dropping it in there. But yeah, very, very pleased and still somewhat surprised that that took first time. Clearly the technique's coming together. Wunderbar. So I got that to take some silver birch bark, scraped it into a dust, you know the score by now, and then struck it off my ferro rod. So now what I'm doing is, unusually I've dropped that in, as you can see. This is what I'm talking about, this being a sort of an upside down fire. I've dropped this in at the top. You're somewhat fighting physics here, because of course fire burns upwards, heat rises upwards. So in a traditional fire you would place on top of this your kindling, then your fuel. What I need it to do is I need this to catch below, I need this to catch the kindling, those super fine twigs that are below this, and then the fuel that is below this, and then we're away. So something of an unusual physics at play here in some respects, compared to what and how we'd normally approach this. So I've got a good burn going on there. It's whether or not that burn is being transferred to the kindling and fuel below it. Let's cross our fingers. I'm just checking here, unlike a traditional fire where once you've got that kindling going in the tin, when you put your fuel on, you can kind of set back. With these stages, if I just put my mug on and walk away and those pieces of kindling below this don't catch, I'm off to a bad start. So let's have a little look around in there. Okay, I can definitely see, I can see some kindling and some fuel burning, which is great. Don't want to make an assumption that it's burning everywhere. I think it is now. Good, good. Let's get that mug on there. putting the hot into hot chocolate. Stove worked absolutely fine. I've just had a crafty little lay here in the hammock. Just every now and then popping my head over the top, I could still see the flames licking around the bottom of the metal mug. Taking the hot chocolate off, I've just gone over there, and as you can see yourselves, loads of heat still in the bottom of that. I suspect if I was to put another brew straight on top of that, might take a bit longer, but there's so much heat come off from it, I reckon I could boil another mug of water off that. Towards the end of the video, once that's all died down, I won't add any more fuel to that now, no more kindling out. We'll just let that die down and naturally burn itself out. And towards the end of the video, I'll just share with you how little waste, how little residue, how little sign there is actually left behind compared to a bigger scale fire where you've got the you've got the burnt ends of the logs and things to distribute and to get rid of. Just really powder left at the end of using one of those stoves. So I'm going to finish this brew off. I'm going to finally have this sandwich. It's way gone lunchtime. I'm going to finally have this sandwich, and then I'm going to start to craft that pot hanger that I mentioned earlier on. So if you'll excuse me, it's a very belated lunchtime for me. I've just returned from some resource foraging, and in pretty much the same area where I was earlier on in the video, where there were all of those what I now can confirm to be ash, Fraxinus excelsior, all those saplings that were dead standing. There's also a heck of a lot that ain't dead standing and is relatively small and young. So from just one fairly thin young stem, I've managed to source this, and what I'm seeing in here, I'm seeing eventually a pot hanger made from this. Just above this section was this, and I'm seeing a pot hanger there, and just above that section, you started to see, I possibly spoiled the surprise there, leave it, there is a broiler, I think, wrapped up in that somewhere. So yeah, just one very, very young, small sapling that, if I'm honest, judging by the amount of cover that there is above us here, was probably going to end up the same as those other pieces of dead standing. So yeah, I think I've got some few little woodcraft projects that I can put into play off the back of these. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to get the garbage out. I'm going to do some carving and some cutting and some splitting, and hopefully in a few minutes time, or probably a few seconds time in your money, but in quite a few minutes time in my money, in my time scales, I should hopefully have a couple of little woodcraft projects that I can share with you. I'm just starting off making these initial cuts for the beak of the pot hanger. Now, one thing that I always try and mention whenever I'm carving a pot hanger on video is this, because the first time I ever did it, I got it wrong, and then went to one of the courses with Frontier Bushcraft, Paul Kirtley. The beak that you're carving should be on the same side as the hook that you will hang your pot from. So if the hook's on this side, which it is, the beak needs to be on this side, not this side, because if it is, apparently it will all hang crooked. The centre of balance and the angle and all of that will be crooked. Perhaps I'm exaggerating it here, but you get the idea. It will be off centre. So to have them all hanging from the same side, the pot, the hook and the beak all on the same side, is the optimal way of carving one of these adjustable pot hangers. The vertical, the hanging part of my pot hanger is now complete, so we can see there's the natural Y that was in the branch anyway. That's what I can suspend the pot from. Moving down, we've got the first beak. Let me just try and, there we go, got the first beak there. And moving down a little more, or moving up a little more, I guess it depends on your perspective. We've got the second beak there. I'm only put two in these. I suppose if I was actually out tonight, I might put a third one in. But to be honest, I think you know, you either want it in the heat or you want it above the heat. It's not an electric hob at home where you have infinite adjustments. So that's what I've come up with so far. I often find that even when I've spent quite a bit of time doing these, once you actually get a pot hanging on them, and once you actually get the 45-degree stick that this hangs from in place, things often need a little tweaking, but each time I carve one of these I get a little closer to not needing to tweak it as much at the final stage. So practice makes better, as I say. So that's the pot hanger itself. Next stage, I've got a nice long sturdy limb here. The thicker end of this, I'm probably going to fashion some form of point on it, but I'm going to jam it into the ground and probably place a log underneath it to act as the support. And then at the thinner end of this, which is still, you know, thumb knuckle thickness or thumb joint thickness thick, I'm going to carve a wedge, almost like a Phillips, almost like a flat-headed screwdriver to the end of this, and from that beak that you've just seen will sit onto there, theoretically anyway. A little tip that I want to share here that I was given is when you've got your relatively long straight branch, before you start to carve into the end of it, put it on the floor, and it will naturally, as that just did, it will naturally want to sit one way or the other. It will naturally want to roll to the position where it sits naturally from a gravitational centre of gravity perspective. So I often find, dear God, it's not easy to do with aircraft. Do they know who I am? Put the thicker end on the ground, a really thin twig, just put it underneath there where my finger is now, and you'll find it will roll and find its own centre of gravity. And that's the orientation that you need to keep in mind when you start to carve. If you carve away from its centre of orientation, if you carve away from the way it wants to sit naturally, things are likely to go very wrong when you put the pot hanger and your pot and your food above a hot fire. You could end up with a barbecue that you hadn't intended. So a little tip from me there. You can have that one. As promised earlier in the vid, I said I was going to show you the sign of what was left in here, the debris. So there's the debris there. If I pile it all on the floor, that's what I'm left with. What is it? It isn't a handful of ash that's left. That's completely cold now. So as I said earlier, it doesn't take a great deal of fuel. You can get a really good, I won't say it's a long burn, but it's certainly a very efficient burn. You can do a lot with it. You can get a lot of heat for the amount of fuel that you're putting in, I guess is what I'm saying. And it's a very controlled burn and leaves, as you see, next to no visible ash whatsoever. So that's another reason that I like using this. As I said earlier on in the video, if you want to see me sort of do a detailed breakdown as to exactly how this works, don't expect a science lesson, but if you want to break down as to how this works, then do let me know in the comments below, and perhaps I can do a video that just focuses on what I've learned about these wood burner, twig burner stoves. Good bits of kit. Here's the finished pot hanger product. There's the upright that I carved earlier on with the beaks that I've been talking about. Here's the 45-degree stick that I was talking about, being able to find out just how it hangs and the way that it wants to naturally orientate itself. On the end of it, I've got my mug just as a counterweight, just to signal, or just to represent a Dutch oven or a zebra billy pot or something like that. As you can see, this is close to the ground, so it's close to the fire. It's on maximum burn. I can move it up, and then I can move it away from the fire for more of a simmer or more of a slow cook. And if I had more notches in more of those beaks, clearly the way that I could adjust that would be more variable. I would have more options for the adjustability. But as it is at the moment, it's either on the simmer or it's on the boil down there. Always enjoy doing these projects. They're relatively simple when you look at them, and I guess they're relatively simple once you're well practiced at them, but actually there's a lot involved. There's a lot of fine carving, there's a lot of thinking about how the wood will hang and how it will orientate. So I do enjoy these sorts of projects. It's just a pity I'm not doing an overnighter and could have used this for real. Hello. Oh, come and get in camera shot. Sit yourself down. Sit down. Good girl. Good girl. There you go yourself. Oh, she's a good girl. But I'm going to cache this, both of these parts of the hanger over where my hammock is, and if I come back here in the future, which I'm intending to do, then I've got a head start on the evening's meal, haven't I? That's the pot hanger project done and dusted. You may recall earlier on that I collected a few other pieces of wood as well, aside from just what I was going to use for the pot hanger, and I've crafted myself a broiler stick. Those of you with a good memory will remember that I attempted to make something similar to this. Crikey, must have been back in the late winter or really early spring. It was a little while ago now. It was not successful. Firstly, it was winter, so there wasn't a great deal of sap in anything, and every time I sort of bent something, it cracked and it shattered, and it was an absolute nightmare to fashion something even remotely resembling this. And then when I did, the dog ate it. Remember that? Remember how you laughed at me? Yeah, that occasion, man's best friend ate man's best broiler. Come back in the spring, actually it's probably late spring, early summer now here in the UK. It's the middle-ish of June. Far, far simpler to bend. Look at these, if you follow this, these two where my fingers are here, where my fingers are touching, they're natural, it's a natural junction in the branch, and this twists all the way round. Let me get you in shot. This twists all the way round and interlocks with this junction that twists and interlocks as well. The central stem here is the central stem that was always in that twig, and then both horizontally I've placed some smaller shoots, and I've placed another vertical shoot here. For those of you who are thinking, that's great Craig, it looks fantastic, what the hell do you use it for? You use it because it's green wood. You can use it relatively safely over a fire to cook things on. So you could put bacon on there, you could put a burger on there, you could put something on there that doesn't need, that needs to be close to the heat, but you can't be bothered sort of holding it on a stick over there. You could place it on there. Probably need a longer handle, to be fair. This is probably quite short, although you could stick it in the ground and prop it up with a Y-fork stick, and it's just a way of being able to get your or whatever your food stuff is. Imagine this is probably meat. I can imagine fish, bacon, burgers, joints of meat, that type of thing, relatively small thin joints of meat, over a fire cooking on that. So that was my first attempt. I'm going to try that again. It was insightful, and it was a good reminder that from one really short piece of this ash I was able to fashion both parts of the pot hanger, this broiler, and don't go anywhere, I also had this left over, which, as you can see, looks cunningly like another pot hanger in the making there. So if that one had gone belly up, I had a backup here. So two pot hangers, pot hanger prop, the 45-degree angle I think goes in the ground, and a broiler, all from a really, really small, relatively short piece of ash. So always worth remembering, if you're going to try and harvest something, what's the maximum that you can get from that? It would have been very easy to throw that away. That was the end of the limb that I took, end of the sapling that I took. Really easy to have just thrown that away and not thought about it, because it was the pot hanger I was focusing on. Actually, if you know what to look for, and you start to get your eye in looking at these things and crafting these things, you can see all sorts of projects and useful things around you that you would otherwise perhaps just have discarded. Anyway, take my recycling head back off again. Pot hanger in the making, and a broiler. An enjoyable afternoon crafting those and thinking about how to bring those together. Hope you've enjoyed watching it. Well, what a busy and broadly very successful day. The hammock went up fine, and so far it's stayed up. The bow drill, what was all that about? I've never ever had a bow drill just work as quickly and first time as that did. I'm still not entirely sure what I did wrong / right for it to work like that, but whatever it was, it worked brilliant. I'll be watching that the footage of that back again just to see, I don't know, just to see if magical pixies sprinkled fairy dust on it. It worked brilliant. Got an ember. Couldn't of course take that ember to a flame because in the area that I'm in there was nothing that I could find or think of that was suitable for bird's nest tinder bundle. Good point there about it's all well and good, you know, fashioning or finding something to initiate that heat, but you've got to take it beyond that. So I'm not disappointed in that. I'm not disappointed at all. I am very confident if I'd had the right bird's nest material, I could have taken that ember to a flame. I am confident in that. It just was part of the original plan. It didn't pan out. The Ohuhu fire stove, wood stove, once again played an absolutely sterling job, and I think you've probably got the idea by now throughout the video. I'm a big fan of that. Anthony, the guy who gave it to me out in the States, I've said this in every video, I hope that I've used it, but a massive thank you once again for gifting me that when we were out in the States a couple of years ago now, wasn't it? We must do it again soon. And of course the wood crafting projects in the afternoon, the pot hanger, the broiler, that was a nice way to spend some time as well. And it's given me a few ideas, if I'm honest. In that area over there, out of shot, there are lots and lots of small saplings that are not going to survive simply because of the amount of overhead cover that they're battling against. So it's a good area to come for those woodcrafty project type size pieces of both green and dead standing wood. So yeah, so a few ideas about how I might come out again and utilise them for some other wood crafting skills. If you've enjoyed what you've seen today, why not check out on the screen right now over in the top right hand corner. There's a list there, a playlist of all of my other all-dayers that I've done so far this year. You'll also be able to find elsewhere on my channel a playlist of my other all-dayers from 2018 and my all-nighters from 2017. So why not take a look around the channel, see what takes your fancy. Thanks as always for watching. It's really, really appreciated. It's good night from me, and it's good night from there. Give us a kiss. Give us a kiss. Kiss. Give us a kiss. Hey! Cheers, folks.